Hello everyone, Professor Thompson here. I decided to go ahead and cancel class today, which is April 29th, and so you can stay dry, you can stay warm, and I figured I would give you a video over some of the material I would have covered today in class. So let this video serve as a supplement to preparations for the final exam, and then we will have our first round of speeches on Wednesday. You can see that Crystal, Riva, Porter, and Rocky are scheduled for Wednesday. Sal, Brandon, Rhea, and Jack are scheduled for Friday. So we do have speeches that start on Wednesday according to our schedule right here that's on the announcement page. But just want to say, no class today. Couple things that you need to think about. First of all, you should have taken the quiz last week. You needed to have taken it by Friday. So if you didn't take the quiz, obviously that's not a good situation for you, but you want to make sure you're preparing for the final exam. If you need help on your presentations, please use my office hours. My office hours are posted on the syllabus. Every one of you at this point, for the most part, has participated in a student conference, so that's great, and appreciate that. Hopefully you're on the right direction or on the right path. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into what I would have talked about in class today, which would have to do with nonverbal communication. I just want to point out that in Blackboard, if you click the PowerPoint tab, I have a couple nonverbal communication PowerPoints available to you. And specifically, I want to focus in on this one. I'm going to just talk about a couple key points out of this particular set of PowerPoint slides on nonverbal communication. And the first element I want to talk a little bit about quickly is paralanguage. And paralanguage is something that a lot of people don't think about as nonverbal communication. We call paralanguage vocalics, or the study of nonverbal vocal messages. You can see that I write the relationship aspect of communication because if you remember, about 12 weeks ago, I handed out a handout that talked about the axioms of communication, and one of the axioms mentioned that we have content and relationship aspects of communication. And relationship ultimately might be how we communicate, and so in nonverbal communication, that how piece might have to do with paralinguistic cues. So let's look at the types of paralinguistic cues. I will tell you that there are three distinct types of paralanguage or vocalics: vocal characterizers, vocal qualifiers, and vocal segregates. The one that gets studied the most often within textbooks and mentioned in classes like this is vocal qualifiers, primarily because this qualifier one we can directly tie it to public speaking with how intense your voice is, showing the passion for the topic, or the rate of speed changing to indicate excitement on the topic, or maybe the rate kind of slowing down so that you can draw focus and attention to an idea. Change in the volume and pitch, again, those kind of go with the speed and intensity to really indicate interest or value to something, or maybe the idea that you are sad or sullen at a point in time. A number of pauses, that silence as an element of nonverbal communication to indicate, that something is quite important. But the vocal qualifiers is only one of the three elements of nonverbal communication within vocalics. The other two, first is vocal characterizers. These are the sounds that we make when we're laughing, crying, yawning, and so forth. Right? Yawning. These vocal characterizers give us insight into the emotional status of somebody. They essentially funnel the possible emotions that one might be experiencing at a given time. And then we have to use other factors in our perception to maybe understand those paralinguistic cues. So someone might be laughing and we can laugh for a variety of reasons. They're nervous, happy, right? Um, Maybe you can think of another, but then we go, oh, well, they're laughing and it's happening right before they have to stand up to give a speech. They're probably, laughing because they have or experiencing nervous laughter. So, again, vocal characters are insight into emotional states. Vocal segregates is something that we study with regard to public speaking a little bit. But these are the vocal disfluencies that are not symbols. So, these are the segregates. These are different than actual symbols such as like, and basically. Something that I want you to get to think about is how I've given you some feedback on your speeches so far. I've included things like reduce the vocal fillers. I use vocal fillers as this umbrella term to cover both the symbols, like, basically, and the segregates of your paralinguistic cues, the ums, the ers, the uhs, and so forth. So realize that I prefer to use that umbrella term, but I'm including both verbal and nonverbal cues in that umbrella term. But specifically, when we look at nonverbal communication, it's we call those vocal segregates. What's interesting is some of the research on vocal segregates is, in my opinion, it's not overly clear, and it probably could use some updating. Read a study from about 10 years ago that talked about how people who use high amounts of vocal segregates may have less cognitive complexity and they lack in verbal maturity. And that study was done in a college classroom, so it was looking at students much like yourself. And quite frankly, when I look at all of you, the reasons I see you using vocal segregates don't really have to do with your lack of maturity or your lack of cognitive development or cognitive complexity. More often than not, your vocal segregate use often is linked to either English being the second spoken language that you have because maybe you grew up speaking Polish or French or Hindi or Spanish or something, or that you're nervous. And so that anxiety, that communication apprehension is driving the inability to maybe connect ideas because you're forgetting what might be next because of that anxiety. And so we hear those vocal segregates as a killer kind of filler as we trigger what our next thought might be. So again, characterizers, qualifiers, and segregates, the three kinds of paralanguage I want you to be aware of. Touch is the next topic that's on the PowerPoint itself, and I wanted to really simplify this in some way. Again, I'm trying to make this a 20-minute or less video so that you have access to some content quickly. The study of touch is haptics. It's the study of human touch, and the amount of touch we need greatly depends on our culture that we're a part of. Are we a part of an Asian culture? Are we a part of a Western culture? What is our cultural background? And then our family, because our families are our immediate social group. They're a primary group that we have. We're born into these primary groups. We don't get to choose our primary group. And so the family upbringing we have has a huge influence on how we will or will not touch other people. I can think back to even my own grandparents, where my grandfather was more likely to give my father a handshake than he was a hug. And so that kind of same touch aversion exists to some level with my own dad and my relationship today. And I can see that. And so as a communication scholar, as a communicator myself, I try and break that cycle because I think that touch can be a very healthy part of human interaction. If we went around the room and we were asking each other, what can touch communicate? It can communicate a variety of things: power, love, authority, affection, caring. And I wanted to try and give you, in some sort of small, condensed way, one or two ideas that you could relate to and you could think about your daily interactions. So what I decided to do when overviewing haptics is just break it down to 5 different types of touch. And the reason being is, no matter where you are throughout your day and what you're doing, all of your touching behaviors that you're engaging in will fall into one of these 5 categories. The first is what I call functional professional touch. Functional professional touch is the type of touching behavior that you would engage in to complete a job function. So, for instance, as a college professor, I have really 0 functional professional touch. Now, and I say that as a speech communication professor, right? I don't really have a reason, maybe other than say a handshake to say congratulations. I don't really have a need to touch students. Now, if I was a nursing professor, I might have to demonstrate how to care for a patient, how to transition somebody from a gurney to a hospital bed, how to put an IV in. There are some functional aspects of my profession, if I was a nursing professor, that I would have to touch people. But, you know, I want you to think of it as a continuum, right? On one end, you have no touch needed to complete the job function. And on the other end of this dialectic, a complete need to touch. So on one end, you might have somebody like a speech professor or somebody who works IT or a call center person. But on the other end, this far end where your job function relies on touch, you might have somebody like a dentist or a hairstylist or a masseuse that touching is essential to complete that job task. So again, functional professional touch would be that first kind of touch. The second kind of touch is what I would call social polite touch. It is the smallest category of the 5 touching behaviors. And the reason why it is the smallest of the 5 is because it is very specific to when we greet somebody for the first time, coming together in a relationship or in a communication exchange. And it's also reflective of when we separate from a communication exchange. And so that could be, in some cultures, just a simple handshake. It could be a variation of a handshake. It could be kissing on the cheek. It could be kissing on the mouth. But social polite touch, very, very context specific and very culturally specific. The next form of touch, friendship warmth touch. Friendship warmth touch is the type of touch that is a positive type of touch to show goodwill and appreciation for other people. If you walk up and down the hallways with your boyfriend or girlfriend holding hands, that would fit into here. If you went and saw the Avengers this last weekend and you put your arm around your significant other, it would fall into this category. Maybe you had a death recently in the family, and so you were consoling somebody. That patting of the back or that embrace would be, support and empathy. It would be this friendship warmth type of touch to show some goodwill to other people. Friendship warmth is the largest category of touch. The fourth type is what we call sexual arousal touch, and it's definitely a much more intimate kind of touch. You can see that the first bullet there says the words intimacy and interconnection. Those are the 2 keys to sexual arousal touch. As part of friendship warmth touch, that would involve kissing, as well, but it would be kind of those peck kind of kissing, whereas in sexual arousal touch, we would see more intimate kinds of kissing where the mouth would be open, fluids would be exchanged, and so forth. So much more selective in who we would engage in sexual arousal touch with, and obviously various forms of intercourse that would be the culminating activities of maybe sexual arousal touch. The final category is aggressive touch, and so when you start thinking of negative or ill will towards others, negative feelings or ill will, this would fit that. The punching, the kicking, the slapping, the eye gouging, the shoving all fit into this category. And so again, I'm dissatisfied, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm disgruntled. These kinds of feelings are often associated with aggressive types or forms of touch. So again, I want to just kind of clarify, right, that the touching that you do in your day would fall into one of these 5 categories. If you were a boxer, and in order to, you have to box somebody else, right? Where does that touch fall? Functional professional. Because in order to complete your job function as a boxer, it's functional professional touch, right? We see that it's aggressive in nature, and people might go, oh, well, that's aggression. No, it's functional professional. You don't go into a boxing ring and play patty cake, right? So you got to remember that is it essential for the job function or not? Okay, there are a couple optical illusions I want to mention. Two specifically. First is what I call mock attack. Mock attack is when you engage in aggressive touch in a friendly way. So if you've ever played Slug Bug or Pinch Bug, where you see a Volkswagen Beetle and it gives you permission to, beat the crap out of the person sitting next to you, well, that would be mock attack. It's really friendship, warmth, touch. You do it because you want to exhibit the physical closeness and the united behavior between you and whoever it is you're playing with. We see couples engage in flirting behaviors where it will be that play wrestling around, jumping on each other's back or tackling each other, which is a flirting behavior that exists. Again, often testing the physical waters in the relationship, part of that cost-reward analysis that we talked about in previous units, where if I touch somebody in this way, kind of a little bit aggressive, I'm not doing it because I'm mad. I'm doing it because I want to touch them, right? I want to work towards that bridge between what we might say friendship, warmth, touch, and sexual arousal touch. And sometimes we can do that in a mock attack way. The other one is sadomasochism, and sadomasochism would be the punching and the kicking and the slapping that's a part of our sexual behaviors, and it's a fetish behavior. So I say that it's a very small number of people that actually engage in this kind of behavior, but the 2 words I use, intimacy and interconnection, the pain that is inflicted on the partners within this are achieving those 2 particular ideas, intimacy and interconnection. So it's pleasurable in that sense. And so those kinds of behaviors would fall into that sexual arousal category. So that's our optical illusion. All right, I'm going to end there for today for this short video to replace class. But I will say that there's this other section on environment, space, and territory. I would highly recommend going into the PowerPoint and looking at this PowerPoint and browsing through ideas of proxemics, which is the study of spatial relationships, and some of the things that I have down that are very, very kind of clear and organized. This idea of what environment does. This guy named Edward T. Hall, some great information about Edward T. Hall and his classifications of personal space, personal social space, intimate space, kind of some stuff on barrier behaviors, on the difference between personal space and personal bubble, the idea of territories, primary, secondary, public. So territorial markers, this is really a wonderful idea about central boundary and ear markers. So you might take a peek at that. I know that I will not get to this idea of time when it comes to the final exam. So I would just kind of remind you again as we finish up this video that our speeches start on Wednesday. We got Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday next week for our presentations. I look forward to those presentations and enjoy not coming to class today, but realize I will be in my office today if you want to swing by to consult one-on-one on your presentation. Everybody have a great day. See you Wednesday.